Okay, so welcome back to this session. And today I want us to talk about implementing database auditing. Now, when it comes to auditing, we all know that we have different ways of auditing, especially in accounting, where audits are being performed by auditors. And it's all about ensuring that there's transparency and more of an accountability within different areas. So in database, we also have a way of implementing database auditing. And we have around 3 ways of database auditing. And this is based on, of course, the methods that are being used and the way they are done. So we are going to go through probably the first 2 or probably all of them, and we will end up seeing how auditing is being performed or how we can perform auditing in database. Now you see, auditing is being performed by a sys admin or a system administrator just to track probably different activities that are happening within the database. And these activities are being performed by other users. So other users will not be in a position to understand what is being tracked or what is being audited. It's only within the domain of the system administrator. So it's actually the work of a system administrator to implement these types of auditing. Now, first of all, we need to understand what is database auditing before we talk about the types. And when we talk about the database auditing, in this case, we are talking about implementation. So I'm going to just use this one as my board. So when we talk about database auditing in this scenario, of course, we will talk about other types. And when we have this type of auditing, let me just type it like that. So it's something that I want us to probably know. So when you talk about database auditing, is actually a process where we can monitor and record selected user database actions. Remember, it's actually the users who are performing these actions. And what are these actions in essence? These actions are, for example, the use of DMLs. Whenever users uses a select statement, delete, update, insert, we need to track how these how these statements are being used or are being implemented. And it's actually to the benefit of a database administrator or a system administrator, because in case of any issue arising, he or she may be in a position to explain that this is actually what happened in this particular table. So in standard auditing, we normally use some initialization parameters, for example, the audit and no audit. So we are going to have a look at some of this, the audit and no audit. And of course, we are going to digest one at a time. So there are these parameters called the audit. We're going to start with the audit. And of course, this is in line with SQL statements, which are there to be audited, because we are not auditing any other thing. We are auditing the SQL statements that are being used by normal users. So this, it's either we are working on the SQL statements, which is connected to privileges and connected to the schema objects, network, and of course, multi-activities, which you can talk about them. But for our case, we need to track down the SQL statements that are audited. So just to know that when you talk about database auditing, it's all about monitoring and recording of selected user database actions. And these are things that should be seen or should be done by a system, system administrator or database administrator. Now, we have some types of database auditing. What are these types of database auditing? Now, the types of database auditing, types of course, database auditing. In this case, when I talk about the database, remember we are in line with Oracle database. if you get to other databases, then you can also have their own way of auditing. But in this case, we are talking about the Oracle database. And number one, as the type of auditing, we will talk about something called the value-based auditing. We will talk about number two, we have something called the fine-grained auditing. And then number three, we can talk about something called the standard database auditing. Standard database auditing. So these are the three types of auditing. And we need to see what is the difference between the value-based auditing and the fine-grained auditing and the standard database auditing. Now, all of them, the three types of audits or the three types of database auditing, as I had mentioned here, actually ends up performing one thing. All of them actually tends to monitor and record any, of course, selected user database actions that are being performed, whether it's an update or delete within the database. And of course, the difference between them is now their syntaxes. So, and the scope, because if you talk about the standard database auditing, this is only, only captured within the same, the same tables. Now, we'll talk about the value-based auditing and the fine-grained auditing. Fine-grained auditing is based on creating something called the policy. And we're going to have a look at the policies we're talking about. And of course, the value-based auditing, this is based on creating two tables. And these tables, one must reside in the normal users environment, and the other one must reside on the system database administrator's point of view. So we will create one table as this DBA, and we will create another table as a normal user. Now, whatever table we are creating at the super users environment, this is the table to be tracked. You see, that is the table to be tracked. Now, the one we are creating at the super users environment, that is the one that will pretend to receive information coming from the normal users environment. And these are all the statements that are being captured from that particular environment. So in this case, we are going to have to start from one. And what is going to happen here, I'm going to start from a simple one, which is actually the auditing or the standard database auditing. And then, of course, we will come to the value-based auditing, and then we will end up at the fine-grained auditing. Because the more we start from the standard database auditing towards the fine-grained auditing, you will find that the complexity increases. So standard database auditing is more simple, and then, of course, followed by the value-based auditing, and then we end up at fine-grained auditing. So as long as the fine-grained auditing, here we are required to create some policies. While the value-based auditing, here we are required to create or to involve some triggers. So we are going to create a trigger that will involve or that will capture some information. It's more of mapping information coming from the users tables into the same table that has been created on the side of the super users environment. So this is exactly what I want to show you. And on this part, I'm going to just press enter. We will end up having these errors, but don't worry about the errors. So I'm going to start with the single, let's see, number one. You're going to start with the standard database auditing. Standard database auditing. Now, when you talk about standard database auditing, we need to specify some audit options first of all. What are these audit options? Because we need again to understand how can we enable or how can we perform. If you remember very well, if you're required to perform some backups and recoveries, rule number one is that you'll be required to ensure that there are some features which should be enabled or at some point, there are some features which should not be enabled. So the same case applies to the standard database auditing. So for you to perform standard database auditing, there are some prerequisites, first of all, for us to know. And we have these audit options. They're referred to as the audit options. Now, these audit options, they come in three forms. Number one, we have DB. Number two, we have none. And number three, we have DB extended. So DB extended. So we have the DB, which means that the audit, I mean, if the mode, the audit option is set to DB, then that assures you that you are in a position now to perform some audit. If it is, or in other words, the audit is enabled. If you put it at none, it means that the audit option is disabled. So you will not be able to perform some audits. The DB extended, this one is only an extension of the DB. So both DB and DB extended act the same. With the appearance of both of them or either of them, it means that the audit is enabled. It's only at none or none that you can do what? That you cannot perform an audit because it is disabled. So we need to prove the point. How can we arrive at this? So as you're connected as super user, because everything has to start from the super user's environment, how can we look at this? So we have this parameter, show parameter audit, show parameter audit. And this will enable you to see probably the type of audit option you're connected to. By default, I think it's going to be at DB. So I think for my case, this one, I think I did change it to DB extended, but at some point it requires you to be at DB. But in case it's at DB extended, no problem, don't worry about that. And look at this, we are talking about this parameter, the audit underscore trail, the audit underscore trail. So it means that the audit underscore trail can be changed into different values. You can have it at DB, you can have it at none or none, you can have it at DB extended. But remember, at DB and DB extended, the audit option is enabled. So just to kill some curiosities, or how do I change? How do I change from DB extended? Remember, these are, it's only one, it looks like two words, but it's only one feature or one value. So if you want to change from DB extended to DB, you have to alter system. You have to alter system, and then you set something called the audit trail. So audit, set audit underscore trail, just the same way it is written here. Audit underscore trail equals to, then you give it DB. You give it DB. And for this case, because it's more of a value, then you have probably to enclose it. And then now you can end up talking about scope equals to SP file. Scope equals to SP file. Now, what is happening here? So you see, what is happening here is that I am able, if I'm to execute this, this audit option, it means that I'm going to change from DB extended to what? To DB. And having this scope equals to SP file, this will force me to restart the database so that I can see the changes, So we only apply the scope equals to SP file when we are using what? Alter system. Look at this. We have different scopes. We have scope memory. We have scope memory. We have scope both. Now, both means it's having a characteristics of both the memory and the SP file. So for example, if I press or if I execute this at both, scope at both means it's not a must for you to restart your database so that you can see the changes. you can still see them automatically. Otherwise, if you use the SP file, it will force you to restart the database so that you can see the changes. Now, let's see whether we can have some breakthrough here. If I press enter, now you can see that specified initialization parameter cannot be modified. Why? Because I have used what? Both. I've actually used both. So I'm supposed to use what? I'm supposed to use the SP file. I'm supposed to use the SP file. So since having DB extended or DB, there's no harm. There's no harm. So the only harm that can come, or the only change that can come up here, is now using what? None, setting the audit trail to none. And this means that we are deactivating what? The auditing part. So just to know that you can switch it to DB the way you like it. And I know for your case, it's a DB. For my case, DB extended. So both of them are the same. So I don't want to probably change. So just to know that when you execute this particular option, it's going to change from DB extended to DB. So since I don't want to restart the database and shut down because it's going to take time, just to know this is it. So we are going to move. So no worries if we are to use the DB extended or DB. So, but that is an option. This is an option for you to change it. You're supposed to say alter system, set audit trail, DB, and then scope SP5 is going to go through. Now, from there, that is about how to specify the audit options. So what happens is we also have something called the trails or the audit trails. Auditing trails or audit trails. For example, I think let's do this so that I can explain. Let me put it to, okay, let me just tell you that at DB, if the audit trail is at DB, this one is a more, is actually a standard way of auditing. You see, it's a value which is a standard. So whenever you have DB or DB extended, just to know that you're actually the right way. So both of them will give you the same results, no worry, unless the audit trail is actually at none. Now, we also have these audits. How do you perform audits? Performing database audits come in two ways. It's either you are performing it by access or you are performing it by session. Now, what is the difference between the two? I want you to have these two words. When you talk about by access, you see, if somebody is accessing, let's say select, okay, let me say, delete, update, let me just use all of them, update, and then insert. You see, when a normal user connects to a session, for example, you connecting to HR, and then you are trying to delete one record from employees table. You are trying to update one record from employees table. You are trying to insert one record in employees table. For that, you are performing something called by access. So the audit will be active by access because you are trying to access that particular table and doing one operation or the other. Even select. But of course, select does not make changes. So whether someone selects 100 rows, you see, that does not create an impact. Unless someone does a delete, update, or insert. That actually is a big reason for me to worry as a database administrator or system administrator, because that tells me a lot about the maintenance of the system. So if someone deletes a row by mistake, if someone updates, insert, we will be in a position to track and see who actually did that, or probably which database or which schema did that happen. So when someone accesses a table by these three operations, then we are talking about audit by access. If we want to monitor, if you want to monitor, delete, update, insert, then of course we are going specifically and we're using by access. By session means from the time you connect to that particular user, like HR. by the time you just do con HR, you see, con HR, or even con /assist_db. Of course, you see, con /assist_db already you are operating from the system database administrator's domain. But in this case, that system administrator wants to track this, the normal users or these schemas. So if you try to connect to HR and of course end up performing different actions in there, then of course we will audit that by session. So you are connecting to a specific session and you are accessing a specific table. So I'm going to show you now how we can do by access. How can we do by access? How can we do by access? So in this case, what happens is we need to, if I can just do it the right way, let me just change this one, SP file. Now you can see system altered. So I'm changing now the DB. And then I want to start up, let's say startup force. So we give it a minute. So I'm switching now from DB extended to DB. Now, what happens is, after enabling this particular auditing, let's say the audit trail to DB, we are going to specify the audit options because we need to now understand what are we expected or what are we interested at auditing. So we are going to specify the audit. Are we auditing by table or auditing what? So we need to say we audit or we are auditing the table. Because when you talk about employees, you see, when you talk about the employees, you talk about the departments, you are actually doing a what? You are auditing a table. At some point we can edit or audit, not edit, we can audit views or any other database object or any other schema object. But you see, starting from a table point of view, that will do us good. So, so whatever type of auditing I'm trying to do is actually standard database auditing. Standard database auditing. So let me see. So I'm starting startup force. So this is something I wanted to get rid of because you see it's going to take a little while, but of course it's going to give us a good way to understand. So first of all, ensure that you the audit underscore trail is switched to DB. And of course, if it's a DB extended, it's okay. But by default, it's a DB. Now, second part, we need now to audit. So what are we auditing? So we need to audit a table. We need to audit a table. So let's come here. So I will just type audit table. Audit table, press enter. Let's see what happened. Audit succeeded. Audit succeeded. So the second question is, which table am I auditing? And of course, what type of audit am I trying to achieve? So here we can say that, first of all, we need to audit. And of course, if you still remember by what? Either by session or by access. Those are two types of audits we're going to talk. So I want to select any table. Let's say select any table by HR. I want to select any table by HR and then have it by what? By session. So anytime we connect to HR, we need to audit, select any table. So if I press enter, you can see audit succeeded. Now, secondly, after connecting or after selecting any table by HR, because you know we still have other operations apart from select. We have update, delete, and of course insert. So how can we do that? So probably we need to track the update and the delete and see what happens. So here I'm going to repeat the same thing, but this time around, I'm going to say, I want you to audit what? Audit update, audit delete. I can also include select to what? So you're talking about, let's say on HR by what? By access. So on HR by access, view, table view does not exist. Oh, okay, this is what we are talking about. Yeah, so don't worry about that. Remember, I'm connected as a super user. So I need to say HR dot employees. HR dot employees. Now remember, it is the super users who has the rights. Kama mimi is, let's say for example, I am a system database administrator. I have a full rights to access any other schema, even if there are 1,000 schemas. I'm able to access HR, I'm able to access, let's say Scott, I'm able to access Obama if there. But as a system database administrator, I have full rights. That's why I'm able to connect to a table called employees in a schema called HR from my session. So it means that already I have taken into account the audits of the 3 operations: the update, the delete, and the insert. Now, so another thing you can just do is probably to audit. Let's say you have other schemas, you can still do what? You can still do the auditing. You can still do the audits, and you can end up doing what? So whenever you perform these types of audits now, whenever you perform these types of audits, then automatically as a system database administrator, you will end up having some results. Now, how can we probably view, or how can we view some of this? So when it comes to, remember, it's about the 3 operations, the update, the delete, the select. These are the things we are trying to track. As a database administrator, these are the things we are trying to track. Now, on the other side, so the only thing that remains now is just to check or to view what is happening within especially how will the system database administrator view. So we usually have a table that helps us to capture this information. Now, if I just look at probably some of the tables there, we can just end up at looking at probably one of them and see what is happening. So this means that if already I am connected as this, you see, a user will come in and just connect to HR. A user will just come in and connect to HR. Now, if we look at, first of all, let me see this. I still remember the table. And say describe DBA underscore audit underscore trail. Yeah, so I think this one is the table, audit underscore trail. Okay, so I'm going to take, let's say, the username, the owner, the object name. We also have the action name. And let's see, do we have anything like SQL? Yeah, we also have SQL text here. Now, let's see what happens. Now, that is the table. So a normal user will come in and do what? And probably connect to his session. Remember, this is the session we are trying to do what? We are trying to trail or to audit. So he will decide to do this. Let's say, let me update employees, because this is the table we are talking about. Set salary equals to, let's say, 34,000, where employee ID where employee ID equals to 100. Now, one row updated. Now, it will end up deleting. Okay, I don't know whether it will delete, but I don't want to delete. Now, again, insert, it's going to take, if you remember the employees table, if you describe a lot of columns. So inserting this table again brings a lot. So probably we can just look at the update. But remember, there are these 2-3 other operations. So we've actually used the update. Somebody else will come and use probably the insert and the delete. Now, let me prove this point. So I will go back assist DBA. I'll go back assist DBA and try to view. So I have this table. So as assist DBA, I will come back here and see. Let's hope things are okay. Username, let's say object name. What else? Let's say action name. Okay, we also have owner. Let's say action underscore name. Okay, SQL underscore txt. Now from DBA underscore audit underscore trail. Okay, so what or less about this one. It's going to take a while. It's a long list. So I don't know. So I'm going to create a switch to a different for that Tangoja. So let me just switch to a different SQL. So as we wait for that, so don't worry about this. It's going to take a while. Now, after it finishes, for that, I think I'm going to show you. It's going to show us the operations that have been done. The operations that have been done. So we have a long list on that. A long list. Now, that is how a database type of auditing is being performed. So for that one is a long list. It's going to take a while before it stops. So those are just but process of doing what? Those are just but process of doing a standard database auditing. Now, let me take you to these other types. Let me take you to these other types of auditing. Let me take you to these types of other database auditing. Now, when it comes to the other one, now the query I was trying to execute, you see, once that query finishes, it's going to give us a clue on what operation was being done by the HR. And then, of course, what the operation is, of course, update. And of course, the SQL statement that was executed. That is how a system database administrator is going to track or is going to see from his or her hand. But the process, the steps of doing that is, of course, what I've given you. You are supposed to see the audit trail, set it to the right, whether it's DB or DB extended. From there, you need to audit table. And then, of course, that means you're telling the system that I'm only auditing tables. If there are views, if there are synonyms, if there are any other database object apart from table, don't audit. Just audit any table altered. Then from there, you're supposed to talk about audit, select any table, probably on HR by session. And then, of course, you specify the type of operations you are interested at. So the main ones that are always audited are the delete, the update, and the insert, because those are the things that always makes changes to the database. And it is your interest to actually know what is happening within those operations. Now, so probably as we wait for that to go, we can still look at another one here. Let's talk about the value-based auditing. Let's talk about the value-based auditing. Now, the value-based auditing is another type of audit. And this type of audit, we need to involve, or we need to create, for us to create like two types of tables. And this time round, I think, let me share. Oh, I'm sharing. Okay, let me just share the entire screen. I think I'm sharing a single. Yeah. So I'm going to open another, let me say another SQL Plus, so that we can see. So the other one is simple in terms of probably just using the audit, and everything is okay. So I'm going to probably put this at 28 again, and see what is happening. So this one is at 28. Okay, CLS here. Now, so I'm going to put it this way so that we can see what is happening. Okay, so I'm going to, so don't worry. You see, this one is still running. So that is the reason why I had to shift from the other one to this part. Now for this one again, I'm going to put it, okay, for this one again, I think it's monitoring. Let me stop it. Let me just take everything. Okay. Hope you're able to see. So I am aligning them so that we can make use of both of them. Okay. So here it means that the reason why I'm bringing the two screens is because for this one, the left part, okay, this one, let me connect as SysDBA. This one, let me connect to HR. This one is HR. So I'm assuming that the one on my right is the normal users environment. The one on the left, I mean, the one on the right is the super users environment. The one on the left is the normal users environment. Now, in this case, I'm going to create a table. Create table. Let me call it, let's say, home. Into bracket, I want to have the ID, of course, the number, if you remember how to create a table. And then, of course, we need to have, let's say, the owner. Owner is voucher. Owner. And then, of course, we can also add another one, or even that one is enough for now. Okay, because I've just placed, let's say, the location. The location voucher 20. Yeah. So the table created. So I'll just describe home, and you can see that we have all this. Now, so what happens is, don't worry about, it's because of the size. I've actually kept it. Let's see, 25. So don't worry about that. Now, so when it comes to this, you'll find that we have this. We have this. And this is a table called home. Now, it means that I want to track whatever thing is happening on this table home. Now, take home table as employees table, as departments table, as any other table. Now, on this other side, we are interested at tracking this. We are interested at tracking this table. So it means that we need to create a similar table in where? In this in this part. So I'm going to have it Let's see. Okay, I'm going to have it like that. Let me just also have it like this. So don't worry, this is more of yeah. So for this one, I'm going to create the same table. Create table. Now let me call it OM1. You see, OM1. This one is OM. This one I'm calling it OM1. And then from there, I'm going to have ID number. Of course, I can give it 10. I need to have what? Home. So I'm going to have home. This one is voucher 220. And then of course we have location. Location is voucher. Now there are other two other columns I'm going to add. One, I want the modification time. This one is extra. And this one, I want it to capture the time. So the data type is timestamp. So I want to capture the time when this table was modified. And I want to capture action. What action was it taken? You see? So apart from this table, if you compare this table here, it is similar. The number of columns is 3 in OM. And then of course here we have the same columns here, but this time around I've actually added like two other columns. So the modification time and timestamp. From there, press enter. Table created. Table created. So now I want this table, the table in SysDBA or the table created as a super user, I want it to capture any information that is being modified from this table, from table OM. So for me to map OM and this one, it means that as a super user, I need to create a trigger. I want to create a trigger. So remember, a trigger is always invoked. It's something that invokes whenever an action is performed. So let's create a trigger. This is how a trigger is created. Create trigger, no, create or replace trigger. And then the name of the trigger. What is the name of the trigger? The name of the trigger is, let me call it event trigger. You see, I can call it event trigger, or let's call it, okay, we can call it event, just event trigger, or we can call it even IST trigger. But always, whenever you're creating a trigger, ensure that you give a name which is more attached to it, to that. Let's say event audit trigger, event audit trigger. Then press enter. And then we can say, so because we are talking about the events and the operations that should be involved, which operations should be involved? So remember, a trigger can be set. It's either after or before. A trigger can be fired before an action or after an action. So here we can say after insert, or update, or insert, not insert or delete. So these are the operations that should be there. And then we can say on what? On hr.om. You see, on hr.om. So it means that I'm operating from the super users environment. And of course, my table, which is om, is under what? Is under hr. So I'm supposed to say hr.om. Then from there, we can say for each row, then begin. Then begin. So we are going to use, let's say, if statement. If, for example, we are inserting, if inserting, then, you see, if inserting, that means if this keyword is going to to be used, then what happens? If inserting, then insert into OM1 values into brackets. So we expect that it should be inserted on this particular table, which of course has been given up here, this table. So from this one, I'm going to have something called the bind variables, and this is very useful when it comes to using triggers. We will get used to it. Then we have new dot what? New dot ID, comma. We need to have full colon, new dot owner. Now I'm following what? I'm following these columns. And then comma, new dot location. And then comma, I need to have something called the sys timestamp, because it's supposed to give us the sys timestamp. And then of course, we are going to have insert done. This is more like a message. And then I will end if. Now the same thing now I'm going to repeat. So it means that we want to insert the same values at this table, OM1. Values, this is the bind variable, new.id, new.owner, new.location, because the new now represents what? Represents any information that is inserted on the other table, whenever that user inserts some information. Now, so I'm going to duplicate this now for the update and delete. So I'm going to have it if updating, then of course the same thing, but the message here now is going to be what? Update done. And then I'm going to have end if. Now here again, I'm going to have if deleting. This one is a trigger. Here I'm going to say delete done. Then of course, end if. And then of course, it's more like a PLSQL. It's more like a PLSQL. Of course, when creating a trigger, you may not expect to have it, perfected, because there's a lot of information to be involved. So I'm going to guess it. And I think mine is okay, perfect. So for your case, you might encounter, especially the error you can encounter is, it can tell you that the trigger has been created with compilation errors. If the trigger has been created with compilation errors, then don't assume that the trigger has been created. No, the trigger will not work, but it has been created. So you need to recreate it. And this is it. This is now how it should be done. So this is the table, OM. Then we also have another table called OM1. So OM1 means that it's supposed to capture any information coming from OM. Now let me prove the point as this DBA. Let me select star from what? From OM1. Look at that, no rows selected. Now let's go back to this part. Let's go back to this part. If I select star from OM, no rows selected. Now let's prove the point now. You've seen that no rows are appearing on either side. So we need now to look at this. So I'm going to first of all insert into OM values into bracket. We know that number one, we expect to have an ID. Let's 100 be an ID. We need to have the name of the owner. Let's say Brian. And then let's say the location is Kileleshwa. You see one row created. Now I can come again and update. Let me update Brian. Let's say mistakenly I put Brian instead of Daniel. So I'll just say update OM set owner equals to Daniel, and then say where where ID equals to 100. You see, one row updated. Now let's assume that probably again there's a mistake. So we did actually update or insert even let's say Brian or even Daniel, and probably we need to get rid of them. So I can say delete from home, where ID equals to 100. Now, what do we expect? If I do select star from home, you see no rows selected. But what has happened is that I have managed to do what? I've managed to use insert, I've managed to do an update, I've managed to do a delete. So it means that the system already has taken some audits, So as a CCDBA now, what happens if I do repeat the same statement? Press enter. So yeah, so there's something here to be done. So after that, I need to commit. So hope everything is okay because it's supposed to appear on the other side. Which one have I committed again? Okay, so it is supposed to be this one. This one is what I'm supposed to commit. So it is the user's environment. And then now if I come back here and look at that, look at this one now. So let me just adjust column. So we have column ID. Let me adjust these columns so that we can see what is happening. Column ID format, let's say A30. Column owner, let's say A40. Now, okay, and column, let's say location, let's say A40. Okay, no problem. But now you can see that we have, the name is Brian. Of course, these are the IDs. This represents the ID. The owner is Brian, and the location is Kileleshwa. Now, this is the timestamp. This is the timestamp. That is the modification _ time. And then this one is the action. If you remember that table, desk home one. You see now? So here we have the same story. So you'll find that it's actually there to track all the information given. So number one, we inserted Brian, Kileleshwa. Then of course this was captured, that is the time. It was around 27 June at 1902:41. On the update, we did it at 1903:10. And then of course the delete now we did on 1903:34. And of course with the microseconds. So this is what is referred to as the value-based auditing. Value-based auditing. This is value-based auditing. Yeah, any question up to that point? Yes, Brian. Yes. Yeah. It won't be audited. It won't be visible on the super user's environment. So for that, it means that, you see, for this case, it's very important because when you're working on a production environment, you're supposed to work and submit. So the issue of committing is like you're submitting your work to be stored permanently into the database. So without commit, then you're doing nothing. So you're not making any changes. So it means that your work will be rolled back because it acts now as undo data. Yeah, so until you commit, that is only when the audit will appear on the other side. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.